Hello everyone, welcome to number 3, the third episode in our GitHub Stars series, and today I have the awesome Gina with us. And Gina has got an amazing open source project that she works on full time, and so enough from me. I'm going to let Gina introduce herself and we can hear more about her journey, her adventures, and what the amazing stuff she's achieving and what she's got planned for the rest of the year. So Gina, please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Eddie. First of all, thanks for letting me be here. My name is Gina Häußge. That's a bit of a tricky name for a lot of people who did not grow up in Germany. I am the creator and maintainer of a little nifty project called OctoPrint, which is like a remote monitoring / baby monitor solution for 3D printers, which people can just install on a little Raspberry Pi or something like that and attach to the 3D printer and then have it enhanced with a web interface, which they can monitor everything about, which they can send jobs to, install plugins and all that stuff. And yeah, that's me.
That sounds awesome. So I want to know more about that. But I suppose before we get to that, so how did you get into tech? Like, when did you start? Was it at uni? Was it before, after?
Way before, actually. So I was always a bit of a weird child, I think, because at age 3 I already wanted like a huge heavy drill hammer and all that. But around when I was 6 or 7 or so, my parents got the first computer of the household, which back then was an Apple IIe. And I wanted to play with that, but my dad told me, "Yeah, well, that is more like a tool, not a plate, not a toy." And but I can tell you, can show you something awesome. And so he introduced me to BASIC. I could not speak a word of English back then, and everything in BASIC is English, so that was a bit weird. But but he showed me some basic commands, and instead of the more like traditional Hello World, in my case, it was the name of a very popular children's TV show in Germany that was running in an endless loop on the screen after a couple of minutes, and that was how, basically that was love at first sight. And ever since then, I have been coding, I've always been interested in tech stuff and figuring out how stuff works, how things work. I always disassembled everything that I got my hands on as a child, and so that was, I think, a natural segue, so to speak. And what I also absolutely loved and still actually do love and to this day do is build Lego. And computer programming is a bit like building with Lego, but without you ever running out of bricks, in my opinion. So that was also like a natural fit for me. So this is how I got started.
I like the way you explained that. Coding is like Lego, but it's digital. You never run out of bricks. Love that. I'm so gonna
And you can
that.
and you can even build your own bricks. I mean, if you need one that has a specific shape, right? You don't have to wait for Lego to produce it. You just do it yourself.
Love that. It's right. It's building blocks. I really like that we use other libraries, packages to help us do it, but we can write our own as well, which I think is awesome. So let's hear more about. I love your open source project. I think it's awesome. Like, it's in the 3D printing space, which is just so exciting, so awesome. And how did you come about with this idea? Was it one of those situations where it was scratch your own itch? Did you see something missing and you built something for yourself, and then it just kind of grew from there?
Exactly that. So I got myself my first 3D printer back in, I think, November 2012. 2012? Yeah, 2012. It was sitting right here next to me in my office. And back then, printers do not necessarily have their own memory or anything on it, like they do these days, where you can at least plug an SD card in and print from that. But you still had to have it tethered to your computer and stream all the commands to it and all that. And that was somewhat annoying when you were also trying to use the computer for something else, like playing a game or work or whatnot. And also for hours on end, that thing would sit next to me and produce noises and fumes, which also, I mean, they are not that bad, but if they do it for hours and hours and hours, they can just go on your nerves.
True.
And Yeah, so that was the point where I figured, okay, then there needs to be some kind of solution for this problem. I cannot be the only one who has ever experienced that. And so I started looking around. The Raspberry Pi had just come out in that year, and I looked for something that I could just run on a Pi and put the Pi on the printer and plug in the Wi-Fi dongle. Back then, the Pi did not come with Wi-Fi on board, and be able to remotely monitor it and remote control it and all that. And it turned out there was simply no such thing yet. There were some projects which treated the printer like a black box, where you would just push code there and hope it would get printed, but you did not know if it actually was doing anything. There was no back channel, so to speak, and that was something that did not work for me at all. So yeah, I was still employed with a big IT custom solution development corporation kind of thing back then. So I was a coder, or rather a software architect by day. So it came somewhat naturally to me to also take the opportunity to start up a new pet project, because it had been a while since I last had something like this. And at work, they did not let me that close to code anymore because I was too expensive or something. And so over the course of my Christmas break, I sat down and wrote up the very, 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 very first version of OctoPrint, which back then was called, I think it even was called Cura Web UI at first, because it was forked off another project that, in order so I could you reuse the communication layer, because I had no idea about printer communication back then. And so I just plugged this on top, and it worked somehow. And then people complained that they had to install all of Cura in order to run that thing that I built. So I extracted it, and then it took off from there. So I believe so. After the end of my Christmas vacation, I figured, okay, it's doing everything that I wanted to do now. I'm done with this, and just went back to my regular job. And suddenly I started getting emails and issues and all that from all over the world. And can you make it do that? And can you make it also do that? And hey, by the way, I have this other kind of printer with this different kind of firmware, and it does this and this differently. And can we maybe make it work with your thing as well? And around that time, that was when I realized, okay, apparently other people do have the same problems as I do. And I need to maybe think about how to make this better so it works for everyone and not just me. And yeah, that was also when it got an actual name and all that.
And which, when you said you did it over the holiday season, which holiday season was that? Like how many years ago?
2012.
Oh, it was back then. Okay,
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it started over 8 years ago.
Nice. And
I think I did the first public post about it on December 25th, 2012.
Got you. And what technology did you use? What was it written in?
Python. Yeah. So initially I took a look at Node.js, but back then, at least, I don't know if things are different these days, but back then the ecosystem simply wasn't there yet, especially not if you were trying to stay platform compatible, cross-platform compatible, which was also a goal that I had, because maybe not everyone wants to run it on a Raspberry Pi, but on an old laptop or something. So, and I also wanted to be able to develop it on my workstation, which to this day still runs Windows, because I also am a gamer and I do not want to constantly reboot just to work or game. And yeah, so I decided on Python, and Cura was also written in Python, so I could just use these parts that I still have the communication layer built on these days, and go from there. And I had learned Python a couple years ago. Before that, I started right after university. So maybe I should go a bit back. So after I realized, hey, coding is like Lego bricks without running out of bricks, I decided I need to do this somehow in my life. Then I learned software engineer is an actual job that people can do. And from that point on, so maybe like when I was 12 or so, I was dead set on becoming a software engineer. So university was a natural thing to do right after graduating from school. And so I studied software engineering, or computer science rather. And right after that, I figured I wasn't really sure yet what to do next with my life, and a position opened up at the university to be a system administrator, and so I did that. And this is where I learned Python properly, because for system administration, for automating some stuff, it can be quite nice to have. And this is basically what I then was able to build upon with when OctoPrint started or happened or whatever.
And when did you go full-time onto it? So when did you leave your job and go full-time to it?
So that was a bit of a process, because things exploded, right? And around, let's say at the start of at the mid of 2013 or so, it got quite clear that I could not do this completely just in my free time anymore, because the project was just too big and the user base was too big and all that. And so I first talked my employer into giving me 1 day off. So I reduced my contract to 80% at 80% pay, obviously, and got them to make sure that I at least could dedicate Mondays as well to the project. So it went like that until the early months, I think February or March or so of 2014, when I realized, okay, this 1 day per week, this is not really enough anymore. And I need to find a way to either work full-time on this, or I have to drop this, because at this point it was becoming quite unhealthy and really not sustainable. All evenings were spent on the project, all weekends were spent on the project, most of the vacation days. My friends and family were a bit pissed at me at this point as well. So and I also noticed it in my health, that I was simply not getting the rest that I needed, because I was constantly just either coding or working at work on stuff, or working on OctoPrint. And just at that time, suddenly an email found its way into my inbox from a company, a Spanish 3D printer company, who offered to hire me full-time to work on OctoPrint, because they basically said, hey, we like what you're doing. We want to invite you here to visit us, and let's talk maybe if you want to get on board with us and work full-time on OctoPrint. So I immediately got on a plane to Madrid, and we talked, and we came to a conclusion, and this is how I turned it full-time in August 2014. Then said company sadly ran into some, let's call it, economical difficulties in early 2016. And that was when I suddenly found myself with a full-time open source project on my hand, but no funding.
Right, okay, that's quite challenging.
Yep, and this was the point where I figured, okay, I am deadly afraid of this whole situation, because up until this point, I had always been in a regular employment situation, right? So I had a contract and salary and all that, and social security, insurances, all the 9 yards of regular German work life. And now I had the option of either letting OctoPrint go and going back into something like that by finding another job, which I was fairly sure I would quickly find given my CV, and I was quite sure if I did not try that, I would kick myself for the rest of my life, try if I could somehow make it work through crowdfunding.
Okay.
And that was when I turned to Patreon and fired up a campaign and rallied people to basically put their money where their mouth is, because the project was in crisis, and it was either that supporting me somehow, or I had to give up on that. And to my utter surprise, it worked. So people did, in fact, immediately jump on this campaign and contributed, and that was quite. It was quite the awesome experience, and to this day, I cannot really grasp it. Really, to this day, like there are thousands of people now who give as little as $1 per month, or as much as 20, and simply make it work, so that the whole mass of people together makes it so that I can do this full time, and can do this now full time in this mode for over 4 years now. And this is just amazing. It's stressful and it's insane, but it's amazing.
That's so cool. And you answered my question already. I was going to ask, what sort of donations do you get? Are they around the 1 to 20, or are they in the hundreds or thousands? So it sounds like you go for like smaller donations, but a bigger amount of people.
Yeah. In general, it's like, I mean, there are some. I have two legs basically on which I'm standing donation wise. One side is the recurring ones via Patreon, via GitHub sponsoring, via Donor Box and LiberaPay.
Okay.
And those are like smaller things, but there's also one-time donations, and those sometimes are a bit bigger. It always depends. So like, I do not make rules there. People give me how many they want, how much they can and they want, and I'm grateful for everything, be it $1 or be it obviously more than $1.
That's it's just awesome. I know a lot of people I'm seeing from the chat now. I know a lot of people, want to get into open source full time. I know that I do a lot of open source as well, and people know my story, so I'm not going to go into that. But it's interesting that you've done yours via Patreon and similar platforms, and that's worked out really well, and you've been going strong. And do you find that as time goes on, it is getting stronger as well? As in, are the donations overall kind of increasing, that in the future you might be able to potentially hire someone else to help you as well? Is that a possibility?
It's hard to say, to be honest. So I'm hoping that someday this is something that will be possible. Though in Germany, there's a lot of red tape associated with actually hiring someone, a lot more than in other countries, which makes this a bit more tricky to pull off. But I hope that maybe someday it will get there. It is fluctuating. So
okay.
Right now it's at a point, I would say, where I'm keeping up with inflation and all that, but it's always a bit tricky. I also have started to try to basically diversify, so that it's not just donations. I'm also using ad revenue. I use sponsorships by corporations now as well, and also stuff like merchandise sales, though that is like really, really little amount. But still, this is stuff that I also have started doing. And the idea is basically the shock of losing this gig that I had that allowed me to do it full time because one company couldn't afford it anymore has taught me that I think if you want this to work in some way in open source, you really need to diversify. You need to spread it as far and wide as possible across as many sources as possible, so that if one cannot do it anymore, be it a $1 person or be it a $1,000 corporation, it might still hurt, but it will not hurt as much. It will not put the project at risk.
That's very true. And we got a question here from Santosh, another GitHub star who was on my channel, I think last week or the week before. So if I can maybe generalize this question a bit, I guess from your different sources of income, what's the percentage that you that it makes up your income? So I'm guessing Patreon makes up the biggest chunk that you get.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the smallest chunk is that guessing to be the swag sales?
Yeah. That would be that, I guess.
And
the rest is like in between.
Okay. Where does GitHub sponsors, I guess, sit in that scale roughly? Is it catching up with Patreon or not really?
Oh, it's far away. Like it's currently like at how do you say, like a tenth maybe of
right, okay.
of Patreon. But obviously, I mean, Patreon has been there longer as well, and this was also the platform that I started on. And it's just spread across it. But from the one time from the recurring donation platforms one, GitHub sponsors I think is the second rank right now for me.
Okay, that sounds
with regards to
good.
what I get back from it. Yeah,
that sounds good. And here's a question from ViViV. Let me bring it up on the screen. How often does full-time open source become economically viable? Is it better to do half and half, or work in paid roles for a few years and then full-time open source while using saved money?
It's tricky, I think, to make it become economically viable. So in my case, I think I just had the perfect storm of having a committed community already who had said, who I had been able to show that I can deliver and that I can do a good job. And that, I think, enabled this to work mostly. But I cannot really say what is the best approach here. What I would advise against from a sustainability and personal health kind of position is actually to try to do it at the same time, both. I mean, what I think is important, if you do open source and you do not do it yet full time, then make extra sure that you do not overwork yourself, because the last thing you want is to, we do open source at the beginning at least, and I personally still do it for fun, right? Because we like growing with it, and we like helping people, and we like learning new stuff, and we like solving problems maybe, and playing with Lego bricks that never run out. And so when you do that, but you also have to run a day job, it can start to feel like a second job, and it can stop being fun, and it can start to quickly dissolve or devolve into burnout territory. And this is something that you have to be really, really careful of. So yeah, the last thing you want is something that you love to be actually something you start hating.
That's very, very true. It's very true. It is hard work at the beginning. I think it's just finding that balance. So you want to work hard so you can keep pushing forward, but like you said, not work too hard where you burn out and then you start to hate it as well.
Yeah, I think you should just not try to force it, because I'm very, very much aware that what the situation that I find myself in, that was like a one of a kind situation, like being able to start out funded by a corporation, being able to grow the project during that, and then switching to crowdfunding. And I'm not sure if I had been able to pull this off if I hadn't had this almost 2 years of being able to already work on it full time in a financially secure setting, and proving my worth, so to speak, and also laying some groundwork that then I could more easily build up on after. So, yeah.
Okay, so next question is quite an interesting one from, I think it's Alex. Says, how do you see the future of open source? I know everyone knows my answer to this, so I think it's probably better for you to go first.
How do I see it, or how do I hope to see it?
Both, I suppose. Let's do both. Yeah, realistic and dream.
Yeah. Maybe something in the middle of it. So what I really hope is that, wait, I have to quickly fight with my earpiece again. What I really hope happening, or hope to see happening soon rather than later, is this concept of funding open source becoming more mainstream. Because right now, most people who use open source tools, and this also includes people who use open source tools in a commercial setting, like people working in a company building stuff up on open source tools, they rarely seem to think about how open source gets created. And it just does not fall from the heavens or something like that. It gets created by people, and people need to eat, and people need to live, and they need a roof above their head, and they need a bed to sleep in, and they also need hardware to develop that stuff on. So this is something that a lot of people are still either ignoring or simply not thinking about, and I hope that this maybe changes in the future, and that hopefully people also with stuff like GitHub sponsors and Patreon and all that becoming more visible in the community, people will become more aware that in order for open source to move forward and for projects to actually get to a point where they are like at a professional level and can actually stay at a certain level of quality, so that they also can constantly be considered for commercial work and all that, that they should be funded. And we cannot just always hope that these people will get hired by some company, because maybe they do not want to get hired by one single company, because that also puts you in weird positions that I've been in myself, where your company says your focus should be this feature, but your user base says, your focus actually should be that other feature. And then you're the maintainer in the middle and are torn between the two and are like, okay, I do not know what I should be working on now. So instead of this, I think it would be nice if we could achieve something like the situation where open source developers can actually live from what they do just by them doing it. So from donations, from sponsorships and all that, and not by having to rely on being employed somewhere or having to sell support contracts additionally or something. Because if you already need 100% of your time working on an open source project in order to maintain it and improve it and all that, then you cannot. Where should you find the time to also squeeze in paid work then, right? So this is.
Yeah, I agree. It is hard to. It's going back to that balance again as well. And I think a lot of companies that make big money from using open source to build their project, yet they don't fund a single kind of cent or penny or what is it in euros? Is it cent? I don't know, but like the smallest amount.
We also have cents.
Okay, it's cents. Okay, cool. And they don't even think about that, and they just think, well, this is just a product that probably a big company is who's got loads of money like Microsoft or Google. They can do this for free. It's fine. Yeah. I see that.
I even get that with OctoPrint.
Really?
So I get a lot of people who are like, the team of OctoPrint, all these guys, and also people think OctoPrint is done by I don't know how many people, 20 or so, all of which obviously are only male, of course, or even like a whole company. And then when people learn, wait, it's primarily me. Also, I'm female. Hi. They are like, what? So a lot of people just don't think about it, I think, and they just don't try to figure out who even makes the projects that they run, which is kind of, ever since I found myself in this situation, I've started actually trying to figure out who makes the projects that I use. So that's been an educational experience as well, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's the people who do the hands-on are going to have more of an appreciation for the other open source projects that they use, but the people who hold the purse strings in the company are never going to look down at the details of the projects that are being used. They don't kind of care what pip package or npm package is being used, and should they fund, should they donate to those projects. And I think that's something that hopefully in the future can change.
I hope so too. I think it would lead to quite a boom in open source. I mean, the whole internet is built on open source. Our smartphones are primarily built on open source. You would think that at this point there would be like a better business model than hoping that people give you money out of the bottom of their hearts, basically. And
it's the people that give the money and not the people that are, the big players in the companies that probably have a lot of money, which I find quite interesting. It's people who are, in the tech and so forth, who are sharing their hard-earned money.
Exactly.
And the people who are earning hundreds of thousands a year, they're not interested. They don't care. It's kind of below them, not in a bad way, but it's just something they don't kind of care about. Yeah. Hopefully that's something we can all change and improve on. So, what did I press? Damn it, Eddie, you broke it. Nobody look. Okay, I fixed it.
Yeah, you found it. Okay.
I pressed the wrong button on the Stream Deck. Got to get used to my new office. Let's have a look. Actually, before we go on to this question, I just want to say one thing. This is one thing that when people say, "Hey, Eddie, I'd love to donate to you on GitHub sponsors," and sometimes I ask this, or if they say it, they'll say, "I want to donate $5 to you." One thing I do say is that I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. But if you can donate $5, maybe just give me $1 and donate the other $4 to 4 other people in the open source community. And because for me, $1 and $5, yes, as a 5 times value difference, but I don't know, I'd love other people to get that, because just that $1 still gives me the motivation to kind of, do more and keep going. Even when people share things on socials, I don't know about you, but I love it when if someone took like a screenshot of this and shared it on socials, I'm going to give it a like for sure. But if they add some value, that's something they learned, like if they said, "Oh, I love this tip that Gina gave, it's something I'm going to work towards," or something like that, then I'm going to retweet that, because then they're adding, it's a bit like open source, they're adding value to the conversation. No hint there, everyone, to screenshot this and share something that you like. Okay, sorry, so back to this. So privatization of AI in open source. I don't know much about this area. I'm not sure about you.
Me neither. Sorry.
Okay, we'll have to move on. If anyone has any thoughts on that, do share it in the chat. Do answer each other's questions in the chat because it is quite interesting. And while you're there, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And Gina's details are in the description below, so you can go follow on socials and so forth and find out what exciting stuff is going on. Let's have a look. What else have we got in the chat? Hopefully I haven't missed too many questions. If I have, copy and paste them again. Here's a question by ViViV, which is quite interesting. This is quite a kind of a general open source question about security. Should people find out about what software they're using from a security perspective?
Oh, definitely. And I'm actually kind of shocked that so many companies aren't. So, I should probably not complain too loudly about that, because I look at the stuff that I use, but I do not look completely down the dependency tree on everything, right? And that can be quite long. It's not as bad in Python as it is in the NPM ecosystem, I gotta say. So whenever I look into the dependency folders there, it's like thousands of packages. That's a bit insane, but so that is really something that people should be looking at and should also, my personal opinion is, if I am a company and I fund my company somehow, or I build my company somehow on open source, shouldn't I, as a company, have a very, very deeply ingrained interest in these open source projects to continue to be maintained and to get fixes and to see security fixes also, and also maybe to see new features and all that? Because that would be my logic were I in this position, as, for example, as a CTO or something. Because building my company on something that I do not control in any way, not even in the tiny way where I shove money in its general direction, is a bit, I don't know, not really careful, not really good planning, like very risky.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't worry about things until they start, something breaks or screams and so on. I see a lot of companies don't worry about like automated testing, don't worry about penetration testing or accessibility until something goes wrong, and by then it's too late anyway.
Yep. And the same goes for a library that no longer sees updates, right? We do not even have to look at security for that to be painful, possibly.
True. I had a question I've just forgotten. Oh yes, GitHub Stars. So I know people always ask me how I became a GitHub Star and my thoughts, and they've heard me share this like 100 times. So I'd love to hear it, the story of how it became about, and I don't know, anything else you want to share on that, really?
I'm not really sure if there is that big of a story to it, because I just suddenly found an invite in my email box and was like, huh, what is that? Some kind of new program that I haven't heard about. And then I took a look at it and I was like, okay, that sounds interesting, because not only is it kind of appreciation for yourself that, apparently what you're doing means and matters in a way that it gets recognized by a company like GitHub, but it also gives me basically a back channel to people that or whose product and whose platform I daily interact with. So that has been really, really nice on both sides. And so when I got the invite, I was like, oh, that would be awesome. And then I actually got the confirmation, and the day the confirmation arrived that I was now a GitHub star, I was like, ah! I'm still waiting for my care package because some stuff got delayed, but it's okay. Things go as they are.
You can watch a YouTube video on me unboxing mine if you want. I thought that was
I was actually thinking about that, but then figured maybe I will just maybe that will make the wait harder.
You will. That's why I was saying it to tease you.
so I'm going to just wait a bit longer on whenever it arrives. I'm also still waiting for my GitHub Community Star Award thing.
What? Okay, actually, no. Maybe I'm waiting for that one as well.
I think you probably are as well. I think they are getting printed at the same time or something.
Yes, yeah. That's the 3D printing of our green bars, right?
No, the other one, the one that we got at the Nova
The
event.
NovaCon. There's so much swag they're sending us. I lose track. Every day I wake up,
Well,
there's a new box that's arrived.
I only have got 2 so far, but
Right.
but they were awesome. I mean, the light is from them, and the mic is from them, and the pop filter is from them. So
True. And the water bottle. You got the water bottle, right? Or was that the one
I also got
waiting
the
to
water
arrive?
bottle.
You did.
So I gotta say, I really love mine that I already have. So,
Awesome.
but I have it, and I like having stuff. That is awesome. Yeah.
And then hanging out with the other GitHub stars and being in the GitHub Slack and NovaConf has just
And help
been-
each other on the Slack. That's also really nice, I found. So like, I have this problem. Does someone have an idea? Yeah, try this. Oh, it works. Thank you. So this is really awesome.
Exactly, and I wouldn't have met you really because I'm not in the 3D printing space. So for me, I wouldn't have discovered you, and same with the other people. We got Santos in the chat. Actually, I probably would. I knew about Santos I think before because of the whole Angular space. So yeah, it has worked really well, and hopefully we can encourage people to help more in the community so they can potentially become a GitHub star in the future. I think a lot of people think you've got to promote GitHub. I know I do, but I don't think you or others do. You use GitHub, but you don't promote it. It's not what you do. And I think other people then hopefully can be made aware that it's just adding value, I think, to the community and open source, which is what puts you on GitHub's radar to become potentially a GitHub star.
At least this is my impression, definitely as well. I mean, I do, obviously, when I use tooling provided by GitHub, for example, when I do stuff with GitHub Actions or so, I talk about it because for me personally, it's the right choice and I just want to help people utilize it as well. But that for me, this does not qualify as promoting. That's more like, hey, for me, this worked. Maybe it works for you as well. If not, then no problem. So
that makes sense. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in, so I'm getting a bit behind, so I'm going to bring these up. So I'm not contributing to bigger projects, and if I see myself as a potential employee, don't think any recruiter would be impressed by any kind of my quality of contributions. Any tips?
A recruiter that actually looks at open source contributions, I think, will not really care about whether the project is big, but rather whether the contribution makes sense and adds value. So I would not worry about that too much personally. I mean, I would do that if I was a recruiter. I would not look at, did this person contribute to, I don't know, this big node library, or did they maybe just create a single tiny tool that solves one specific tiny problem, but solves it well. Or maybe they contributed a bug fix to a tiny tool that solves a problem. So I think this is, it's more important, I think, to contribute value than what project you contribute that value to. At least I hope this is also how recruiters see it. If they don't, personally, I would not want to work for them. But yeah.
True. I think a lot of recruiters just look at, is your profile busy, lots of green, but they don't dig any deeper until because I do recommend to people to have an active profile with a fair amount of green, because it's the first impression, and then hopefully later on a hiring manager is going to dig deeper and actually look at the value added. But yeah, I don't think a recruiter is ever going to dig deeper or understand what a good issue is or what a good pull request is or anything like that. So yeah, it is a challenge, but I think a lot of them are becoming more and more aware of it, though, as in hopefully they'll educate themselves a bit to at least look a little bit further into it.
I would hope so, because I mean, getting a really green GitHub profile is like one cron job away, and I mean, you can completely automate that. So it says absolutely nothing as long as you do not actually dig into what these green dots consist of, and in that moment, yeah.
True, but I don't recommend anyone automating it, because for me, when I'm reviewing someone's profile, yes, if it's more green, I think it looks more impressive. I'm going to dig deeper. But as soon as I find out something's automated like that, I discard their entire application. And literally just discard it.
I would also not recommend. I mean, what you can do that for fun if you just want to play around with it, right? On a throwaway profile. Yes. If you just want to figure out how it works, like for experimenting.
Yeah.
But in general, no, I would not do that on my profile.
Yeah, me neither.
And I would also not, I mean, I would also refrain from doing drive-by pull requests or something like that just to have activity, right? Because this is also, if you just fix a typo somewhere which wasn't actually a typo, or so like the typical commits that you get during Hacktoberfest when people try to pad their profiles up so that they can reach these. So these kind of commits, they are not really actually, those that are not actually adding value, you should not try to do them, I think, just to make your profile more green. You should just add value, be yourself, and if it's a fit, it's a fit, and if it's not a fit, and it's not a fit. And I don't think it makes sense to try to be something or someone you're not, just in order to get hired in some position where you then will hate it because they assumed you were someone else. And also, you should not force yourself to work or try to work on big projects which are already drowning in contributors anyhow, probably because they are way more high profile and people think that they can pad maybe also their CV with that. Yeah. And instead, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits all over the open source community contributing to projects that desperately need help and would probably love help in any shape or form. And yeah, just tackling that kind of stuff would also help you to have a busy profile and learn and discover new technologies and find new friends as well. I met quite a number of friends during open source work. And would not make you feel so stressed all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of those bigger projects people want to put on their CV, I contributed to React or whatever, they move so fast that you get disheartened a lot as your PR just ends up with lots of conflicts, and you're just you're a smaller, what's the expression? You're a smaller kind of piece of the puzzle. I don't know what the expression is.
Commit? No.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with cogs, like you're a smaller cog in the wheel or something. I don't know, but like it's there's so many pull requests going on that yours is just. If you contribute to a project, like you said, that's moving slower and that welcomes contributions more and is maybe getting a pull request, like 3 pull requests a week, then yours is going to get more attention. Whereas when you contribute to a bigger project that's maybe getting 30 pull requests a day, then yours is going to disappear very quickly. Maybe not get the attention. You won't learn as much or network as much as you need.
Exactly.
So it's true. So I'm not sure if we can if this is a question or not. The dependency chart of everything, as you mentioned, it just goes deeper and deeper. And I think, as Gina was saying, you cannot go all to the nth level of it. I think it's just, you would like to think that you trust the projects you include and then they trust the projects they include, I'm guessing, and so on. I'm not sure if that's a safe bet or not. But
it's probably not.
No.
But let's just assume it is so we can all sleep at night.
That's true. And I think that GitHub's doing a lot of great work with security, and there are other platforms as well.
Yeah, definitely.
This is an interesting question. Someone asked me this the other day, and it definitely took me back. So, Gina, what was your first open source contribution?
I think the official first open source contribution to someone else's project was... I was quite regular. Now that's the word that I was looking for. I was a quite regular contributor back in the day at the DokuWiki project, which is like a wiki engine, PHP based. This is also how I met one of my best friends.
Awesome.
who is the maintainer of the project, and Andreas Gohr, from whom I learned a lot about maintaining open source projects, and also I got to meet a couple of times. So. That was, one of the, I think I first started writing plugins for that, and then I started pulling, I wrote my first ever fix for some bug in the engine itself, and I remember that I was quite, thrilled about having the patch get accepted, and so that was fun. And before that, I actually tried to build something like DokuWiki myself at first, before I came across DokuWiki, and that was probably my first actual open source project with a license and all that. And even before that, so that was like when I was still back in school around, the late 90s and the early 2000s. So late years at school, I actually wrote some stuff that these days I would consider open source, but they didn't actually have an open source license, so technically they weren't. So that that is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and all that.
I think we covered this, but let me just bring it up from ViViV. Is it bad if a profile is more green due to CI practices with multiple branches for every feature? My understanding is only the default branches count your contributions.
Which is actually something which is, for me, quite upsetting, because OctoPrint's default branch is the stable branch, which only sees merges when I put out a release. So my own GitHub profile is fairly misleading most of the time, because it looks like I'm not doing anything for weeks, and when in fact I am, just not on the main branch. Yeah, it jumps then. It gets filled up then. Okay. But yeah, so you cannot just jump around between branches and do stuff. It only stuff to the main branch actually counts for that thing. So you can do whatever you want with your CI on different branches, as long as it's not the main branch. It will not look bad, I think.
True, yeah, exactly. And I think some people get upset when they do a feature that maybe has 10 commits, but when it gets merged into the default branch, it gets squashed. So it ends up being the commits. Oh, people that want clean history, right? It is important too.
It is important. I mean, I sometimes do this as well. I gotta admit, when it's like when each commit is not actually,
yes, I know what you're going to say,
telling a whole story, but it's more like they do not work separate from each other, and you have to actually apply them all or none at all in order for the code to still stay sensible. Yeah.
What else? So someone's asking about GitHub Actions. I don't know much. Any resources? Well, do you use GitHub Actions for your project, Gina, or do you use something else?
A ton. I just actually rewrote a bot that I use for helping me with the issue tracker and made it use GitHub Actions. And I wrote my first actions in Node as well for that.
Nice.
And it's. I gotta say, I currently consider it GitHub Actions as the hammer to every single nail that I encounter regarding automation in the project, like labeling of PRs automatically based on what files are touched, and
nice.
I do stuff like that. I do tracking of labeling of issues based on certain keywords they contain. I also validate issues, like have people actually included the bug tracking template, for example, with a GitHub action. I auto close them if they don't contain the issue template after 14 days with a GitHub action. Done stale handling and all that, and excessive testing set up. And I have this whole page build set up for the plugin repository, which is a static page powered by Jekyll, which pulls in dynamic data from the statistic page and all that, and then builds it in all via the GitHub action. So I can only recommend getting into that stuff. It's fun, like really fun. Like I enjoy when I get to write a new action, kind of fun.
It is really, really awesome. It is just because you can write it. It just starts off with there's so many. Let me start again. I've said try to start 3 different sentences. There's just so many actions in the marketplace that you can use with just some basic YAML lines, and then if you want to customize it further, then you can use so many different languages, like you said, Node, or I think Python's also supported. I'm not sure, but there are various languages that you can use.
Yeah, you can use Node or Docker. Like you can fire up a Docker, and then you can use whatever.
True.
What I can also recommend, if someone is trying to get into GitHub Actions and is maybe afraid a bit of getting their feet wet completely already with Node or Docker based stuff, there is this fancy little kind of toolkit, which is an action itself, which is action/GitHub-script. And that allows you to just throw a bunch of JavaScript into the body of the action, which then gets executed. And I use that for some labeling actions. And that's like you completely write that in YAML, you still write JavaScript, but you dump it in the YAML. And it's just, if you just need a one-off kind of thing and you cannot really find something on a marketplace that fits the bill, and it's really easy because it's just like 2 queries against the GitHub API and then maybe some logic in between or so, then this is like, I constantly use this for stuff like that all the time. And it's really easy to prototype things with that as well. If you have an idea how something might work, and maybe we'll put it in a proper action after for others to reuse, but you first want to test if the idea in general works, then this is also great for that.
Yeah, it's just someone's writing in the chat that you can use any language with Docker container. Exactly, it's just so flexible. You can trigger off any event in GitHub, and yeah, there's just so many things you can do. It is so much fun. I've seen people do games with GitHub Actions, so in their README they have like noughts and crosses, and then you can just click it.
Oh my god! Okay.
It raises an issue, and then the issue will then update the board in the README, and then you click on it and so forth. It's quite funny to see the things that people have done. I think I even see Minesweep, which is really
Oh my
impressive.
god. I really need to up my README game. I think I currently just have a basic list of hi, I'm Gina and I'm doing this. Thank you for your attention. Bye bye. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the README, you can spend so much time on it though, just tweaking it and improving it and so on. We have a great question here actually. What are your thoughts on this? I have a thought, but I'd let you go first. If a project doesn't have a license, is it not considered open source?
Not really, not legally, no. Because the thing is that in order to say something is open source, the source has to, no, rather there has to be a license that actually allows to utilize it in certain ways. So there is a definition by the Open Source Initiative that says what constitutes an open source license and what it must fulfill and what it must not fulfill. So, for example, it must not restrict your use of the software in any way or shape. So it must not say something like, you may use this, but only in a non-commercial setting or so. In that moment, it is not, under this definition, it is not open source. And in case of at least something like Germany, for example, we have the problem, I would not necessarily call it a problem, but when it comes to open source, it is an actual problem, that any kind of created things, like, for example, source, are automatically copyrighted. So I do not have to apply for copyright for something that I created for it to be protected under the law of copyright in Germany. So when I just throw some source up on GitHub, it is automatically copyrighted under German law, and in theory, no one may use that. They may look at it, but they may not use it, and they may not copy it, and they definitely may not build up on it. So in order for this to be legally viable, I have to attach a license to it, because otherwise it's automatically protected under a very, very restrictive one. So at least I think in the US and also in other countries in the world, it is probably different, but at least in Germany, maybe even in all of Europe, I'm not entirely sure, but there are these very fine points in copyright law that make you very, very aware once you actually look into it a bit, how important it is to actually attach a license to your source and not just throw it up somewhere and be like, do whatever you want with it, because do whatever you want with it is not a license.
I remember last time I was reading this, and again, you're right, I think it's country specific, but if you don't put a license on something, you default to the terms and conditions of GitHub. Then I think it specifies certain countries, and that can't. I don't know if it can override certain country rules or vice versa, but it doesn't make it open source. So you're absolutely right. And so choose a license website by GitHub has some really good comparisons and information. So yeah, I highly recommend people put a license on it. Therefore, it's clear, and you can always change the license later if you want. Is my understanding.
Careful.
Yeah? Okay, interesting.
So, okay, I actually gave a talk about this whole topic once at Maker Faire in Germany. The thing is that what I would recommend is, if you want to choose a license for a project, actually read the license. Yes, it's a lot of legalese and it is hard to understand, but there are tools online that will help you, like tldrlegal.com, for example, has all the open source licenses listed, and you can click on them and it will explain the basic gist of what is in there, like allows that and that case of use, contains liability or doesn't contain liability, allows resharing or not, with or without attribution and all that, and you can look at that. And then you have to think long and hard about whether you actually want to license your work under that. And if you're comfortable, for example, if you choose something like the MIT license, which basically just says, do whatever you want, you just need to keep this copyright notice intact and you cannot sue me for any damages that my code causes. When you use this license, you have to be aware that a company may come, take your code, and build a multi-million-dollar company off of it, or product off of it, and you will get not a single dime and not even actual recognition. And you need to be aware that this can happen. I mean, the likelihood is very small, but still it can happen, and you should be comfortable with this thought. And if you're not, then you need to choose another license. Something maybe that is viral, like the GPL or so, where they at least are forced to publish the sources that they built on your work, on top of your work. Because, and this is where your former question comes in, relicensing of your code can become quite tricky. As long as you are the only person who wrote it, then there is no problem.
Right, okay.
But as soon as you want to introduce a license, for example, if you want to switch from MIT to a somewhat more restrictive GPL, because the GPL has this virality clause in it, you actually need to ask everyone who even contributed a single line to your code, or even just a single character, if they are okay with that. And if they say no, then you have to replace whatever they contributed.
Right, okay, interesting.
Yeah, so this is the reason why OctoPrint to this day is still a GPL licensed, because I started off of Cura, as I mentioned. Cura was licensed AGPL, so I inherited that license because it's viral.
Okay.
And these days, I actually would prefer to be able to just switch it over to something slightly different, more like the LGPL maybe, because that would make more sense in the case of something that is more like a platform or a framework at this point than like a network appliance or something like that, for which the AGPL is more meant. But in order to do that, I would need to get the legal permission from every single person who ever contributed to both the parts of Cura that are still in my com layer, as well as everyone who ever even put a single digit somewhere in OctoPrint's code. And this is like...
How many people? Like hundreds or thousands?
Yeah, I actually do not know right now how big the network graph is, but it's quite a number of people. And frankly, I do not think that many would answer.
True.
So, I mean, even if they would technically be okay with it, right? Try getting people's email addresses first, then trying to get in touch with them, then trying to get a permission from them. So yeah, best settle on a license that you are completely and 100% comfortable when you release something, because changing it, depending on how many people have already contributed, can be a big pain in the behind.
That is true. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. See, I learned something new as well, which is great, which is why I like collaborating with so many people and just chatting to people, because you always learn different things. I know we've covered this already, just to say that I don't think there is a best license. Choose one that you're comfortable with, probably. I prefer...
I mean, there are a couple of popular ones.
Sorry, go on. Yeah, which ones do you say is popular?
There are, I mean, the most common ones these days are the GPL, the MIT, and the BSD, I would say. Maybe a bit of the Apache 2 stuff, but that depends a bit on the ecosystem you find yourself in. I know Apache 2 is quite popular in the Java group, but I've seen it less and less in the Python and Node.js ecosystem. So yeah, and I would just suggest to sit down and read through the most common ones. I mean, on the one side you have the viral stuff like the GPL, the AGPL, the LGPL. And on the other side, you have the non-viral stuff, like the MIT, the BSD, the Apache 2, and a bunch of other things. And just, go on tldrlegal.com, click through them, and just figure out what the differences are and what you want for yourself. Personally, I saw small stuff that I primarily write to quickly fix some kind of problem that I have, and that I then just throw online, don't give a lot of maintenance for or something. More like I merge PRs when they come in, and if there's a big bug and I have an idea of how to fix it, I fix it. But otherwise, it's not that big of a priority and more like a pet project. I usually these days license under MIT.
Okay. Because
it's like here you have it. I don't really care about it. Have fun with it. Use it if it is useful for you, yay. And if not, then, well, what are you doing here? But for things that I really care about, like OctoPrint, I would never, even if I had the choice, I would never license OctoPrint under something like an MIT or BSD license. Because this viral character in this case, there is just too much work on this that I do not really want to have to face the situation that I've now actually faced a bunch of times with companies who simply ignored the license, that they put it in some kind of product of theirs, claim it's theirs, and make a ton of money from it. So especially considering the fact that I'm trying to live from the work that I put in this, right? It's like, also I think it's, I mean, I know this is kind of a philosophical war a bit going on there between the viral and the non-viral camp when it comes to open source licenses. But personally, I think if we want to somehow get companies to actually respect and realize that open sources work and that it doesn't fall from the sky, and that maybe they need to they need to contribute back to it, something like dual licensing or something would also be an option. Like, if you are using my stuff in an educational or in a private setting, then it's licensed under N and under MIT, and otherwise it's GPL or something like that, or you can the other way around. Sorry, so you can do stuff like you can buy a different license. Of course, for that you need to have everything under your control. But yeah.
That is a really interesting one, actually. I do like that, having two licenses. You know, if you're using it for a pet project or for some education or school, then fine, you know, use it. But whereas if you're going to make money out of this, then you've got to you've got to some clause. You've got to keep your code open source as well, or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So I do like that, actually. That's really interesting. That's something I think I want to start doing, having dual license. I'll have to look more into that. We've got some people in the chat. I did paste in some examples about MIT and where like Ansible, Bash, and GIMP where is it? Babel, .NET Core, and Rails use MIT, whereas Ansible, Bash, and GIMP use GPL version 3. And then Santosh is saying that Angular is MIT. So it's always quite interesting to see what other projects are using.
Yeah.
And so, when you're including other projects in your projects, you need to look at those, as Gina was saying, because they might have some restrictions what you can do with it. Can you sell it, and so forth? Because you might be able to sell it,
you also
need to have it open source.
You also need to be very, very careful when, for example, not all licenses are compatible to each other. For example, you cannot. I'm trying to think of a good example right now, but I can't for the life of me. In theory, there are certain license situations where if I having my stuff licensed under an AGPL would try to utilize this library under something else, which I can't think of right now, then this would not work because the licenses would negate each other, not negate, but like they would have clauses that conflict with each other. So it is very important that whenever you work on something that is open source, you actually check if you can include it. For example, if you work on something that is MIT, I think you cannot incorporate stuff that is licensed under the GPL without relicensing your own project as GPL, because the viral clause in the GPL restricts things further, so that the MIT, right? You would give your stuff away for free, but so completely for under terms of the MIT. But if you bind against stuff that is GPL or pull whole code snippets in that are GPL, you are doing the same to that as well. And this is against this license, because this license says you may only share it if you share it alike, so with a GPL or a GPL compatible license, which I think actually has an exception for MIT, but still, I mean, yeah.
There was a famous story, I can't remember the project or the company name, but they had built this open source project that had done really well for I think it was 7 years, and then they thought, you know what, we want to make it a closed source project because now it's done so well. But obviously by the licensing they couldn't just do that, so they kept this open source version that the community can maintain, and then the company took the code and started a closed source version, and legally it was correct, they found a loophole, but oh my god, everyone hated that company forever afterwards after doing that, because literally they just ditched everyone's
happens actually quite a lot. We also had a case like this in the 3D printing space a couple of years ago, when a popular piece of, was it the firmware? No, it was the host software. Popular piece of basically like a competitor of OctoPrint, but a desktop application went closed source. And people were like, and it was a bit tricky in this case because they kept the old version kept kept it open source, but all the code was owned by this one person. So the license in this case, the license switch was completely legally fine, because I mean, if all the people that wrote the code say it's okay to do, then it's okay to do. And in this case, the code was basically built on the shoulders of one single guy, so that was fine. And this person had to eat, so they made this decision. So sometimes it's okay, and I mean, it feels weird, and you look at that at situations like this and are like, but I mean, there's always two sides to a story.
Of course, and I think that's where it goes back. If we've almost gone full circle. I'm looking at the clock, and we're going to have to call it a day soon. But full circle to that. I forgot what I was going to say now. But yeah, full circle to if companies could donate or sponsor these projects, then it becomes less of an issue. And a lot of these companies, spend thousands per day on contractors working on their project, but they don't think about the free software they're getting. Where if they just gave kind of $100 a month, it would just be, and so many of these companies did that, even probably $10 a month, which would be a drop in the ocean for them. Then it would just really help open source move so much faster. So many more people could go full time on open source, and then the tools that they're using could then move so much faster. I think there are so many ways to make money from open source, and sponsorship is just one way. But it does look like that is growing, because selling support, like you said, it was always been popular in the past, but it's not great. It doesn't scale. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Exactly. So, yeah, it's definitely something to think about, and I think it's going to be interesting in the near future. I think people are becoming. Look at GitHub doing GitHub sponsors, right? So now anyone. Okay, some countries aren't covered yet, but the number is increasing. Last time I looked, I think it was like mid-30s the amount of countries that were supported. But anyone can create an account on GitHub sponsors, and people can give them money. I know we have people in my community that have really helped out, and I say, please create a sponsorship account. It's free, you just do apply for it. And he said, but why would I do that? Who would want to give me money? I said, I'm hinting to you. I want to give you money. You've been really helpful. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I think more and more people should apply for that and go and add value, like you said, to projects. Just go add value, and add value isn't always just pull requests and so forth. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's just been such a great discussion, especially the licenses. That was a really good, pleasant surprise, because I think there's a lot of things that, it's a subject that people shy away from a lot. I know I do, because it's just crazy, but it's good that you've done your research, you know about it, you've done a talk on it, and so on.
I would link you the talk, but it's in German, sadly. So.
Yeah, my German's not so good. You have to do an English version.
I mean, I could do the slides in English maybe at some point, but yeah. So that was quite a nicely filled talk as well. I got to say, I was pleasantly surprised by that back then, because I figured if I go, it was at the Maker Faire in Germany. So like a lot of people who just build stuff and are usually not even remotely thinking about licensing. So not software people primarily, but more like tinkerers and hardware tinkerers and people who knit maybe and stuff like that. And I just figured maybe it would be good to try to shed some light on this topic, because as an open source dev, like it's something that I actually had to think about and learn about. And at first I was a bit worried when I handed in this talk that the somewhat dry topic would maybe scare people off, but apparently they were actually interested and happy that someone would explain it to them. So yeah, that was a nice experience as well. Maybe at some point I have to give it again in English or something. I don't know.
I think so. I think it'll be very popular. It is something that people would like to know more about, but don't want to talk about because they just don't know. So I think it'll be really good. Okay, I think final question. I think this is quite an interesting one. So Apollo, thank you so much for the question. And I'm not sure about this. So I'm interested to hear what Gina thinks, if you had any experience or any stories to share on this. So the question is, how would someone under 18 make money from open source? Does it change because they're under 18? I don't know.
I'm not entirely sure about, for example, GitHub's terms of service, but I'm pretty sure you have to be of legal age in order to open an account. Dear me, my tongue is tricky today. Day. Probably, yeah, that's probably it. For Patreon, I think you have to be legal. And yeah, I could imagine that this will be tricky because I would imagine that a lot of companies like GitHub or Patreon would probably like to have you as a creator on board, but it would be like a legal minefield for them to do it. So that makes it probably a bit tricky. Maybe if you had support by a guardian or like a parent or someone, that's about the only advice that I can give here, because I don't know. It is a legal minefield. I mean, I see it with stuff like a support forum only, just where you suddenly have to think about stuff like copper and the child protection laws in Germany and all that, and everything becomes extremely complicated just because you have a public forum. I do not even want to think about being a payment provider or payment service in that case.
That is very true. Listen, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out to come and chat to my community, and you bringing some of your community over, because you had a stream just before ours. And is there anything else you'd like to say as a closing note, or give yourself a shout out? Talk about, give your project a shout out. Feel free to do that.
Oh, actually, just thank you for the opportunity. I had a lot of fun here. And it's nice to talk about all things open source and not just OctoPrint for once.
But everyone, go check out OctoPrint. Do have a look at it. And it's been going for quite a few years, and it'd be interesting to see how it looks. I'm going to go check it out myself after the stream as well.
Perfect.
Sorry, go on.
No, that was...
Okay, thank you again so much. Everyone will say our byes. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already. Check out Gina's social channels in the links below. I understand one of them's not working. I'm going to go check this out after the stream. Gina, hold on for like 2 minutes. I want to stop the stream, and I'm just going to thank you again as well. So everyone have a great weekend. Remember, a green square a day keeps Eddie away, so keep contributing and adding value to open source. Okay, let me try and remember to bring up the holding screen. Bye.
No, wait, I wanted it. Oh.
I'll move that way. Nudge me. I like this setup. We'll see. I like me being small and my guest being big. I think that's that's pretty cool. But lots of people saying thank you in the chat and good night. So that's cool. Thanks everyone.
Bye bye.